Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whisky. I almost said onenationunderwhiskey.com. That didn't work. Let's try that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you say that URL very often?
I don't. Like, do you ever do that? Do you say, like, hey, visit our website. We're at I guess you would say singlecasknation.com, but you'd never say, like, amazon.com. You'd just say, go to Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm joined today, and I'm joined, as always, by you, Jason, Neil, Patrick, Harris, Johnston, Yellen.
I'm the man sitting in the chair.
You are the man sitting in the chair. Like, do you feel you're going to be interrogated, like that kind of chair, or something a little more shocking?
It is approaching Halloween, so I think the answer should be something more shocking.
Yeah, I'm excited about today's episode.
You sound it.
Well, I am. It's the truth. Normally we have to, divide our time, our Jason and Joshua time, or Joshua and Jason time with a guest, with an interviewee or interviewees. But today, Jason, it's all about you and me and a whole fuck ton of whiskey.
There's a lot of whiskey with Single Cask Nation's name on it, circling the globe. So yes, we're going to make some sense of it in today's episode.
Before we get started, I haven't formally done this. I wanted to wish you a Happy New Year.
Thank you. Shana Tova to you too.
And
see, don't you feel though now you're into that position where, like, how far into January can you say Happy New Year? Like, how far after Rosh Hashanah can you say Happy New Year?
I know. Yeah, I think you've got a month. You have a month's window.
I think Americans take about 2 days on the January side of things. You wish an American Happy New Year on the 3rd, they look at you like you've lost your mind.
I'll tell you what I think is crazy. I was told one time that in a gifting situation, be it your birthday, be it a holiday, be it an anniversary, a wedding, if someone gifts you something, you have up to a year to send a thank you card. A year seems way too much to me.
Yeah, I don't know how many people really take that to the letter of the unwritten law, but yeah, that's kind of general policy. When you never sent out wedding thank yous and gave yourself a year to get them out the door.
Yeah, I think we returned from our honeymoon and proceeded to write thank you notes. Did
we, or was there one member of this new marriage on which the thank you notes fell?
Listen, this year, this October, this month, Jason, is going to be our 20th anniversary. And so I say that, one, so that you'll wish us a happy anniversary, but two, also to really let you know that was 20 years ago. And fucked if I remember. I just don't.
You have difficulty with 20 days ago, so
Easy.
That definitely tracks. Is your anniversary the 20th or the 22nd? I know there's been some controversy in remembering the exact date. And again, like you say, it was 20 years ago. I could see why you would get your own anniversary date wrong.
It is the 22nd of October.
22nd. Okay, I think I said that once in a conversation.
Well, here's the thing. The reason why I'm getting it wrong this year, and only this year, is that we're celebrating our 20th. So you get the 20th, you get the 22nd. You see where I'm going with this.
Those numbers are very close together. I know you have.
So close, right?
Squirrel eyes.
Should just call it the 21st and call it a day. Just meet in the middle.
See how Haida likes that. Well, happy anniversary when it arrives on the 22nd.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yours was in May, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Long time ago. Yeah. However, we're still accepting congratulations. So
I have
you have a full year of congratulations.
And it's congratulations, not commiserations. Right? That's
for one of us. I think one of us is having a much better time in this marriage.
So listen, last year, or maybe it was earlier this year, at some point within the past 12-ish months, you and I had decided to mothball our extra It's All About Whiskey. And I thought that this episode would have the perfect title of Extra It's All About Single Cask Nation. We've got so much news going on that we said we're going to forego an interviewee and just really hyper-focus on the many things going on here in the U.S. as well as around the world.
It is. It is a news segment that has expanded to become the entire episode.
So my question to you is, how are we going to start this? Where do we dig in?
Well,
how do we get the foot in the door?
Well, let's think. We have Single Cask Nation e-commerce here in the United States. Mm-hmm. We have Single Cask Nation retail here in the United States. Within that retail, we have regular offerings, and we have distributor and store pick exclusives within that set of offerings. Then we have the global releases, helmed by Jess, who was just here in the last episode talking about them.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And Jess has been working on some cask exclusives for some of those global markets as well. So even within set categories, we have subcategories within them. So I would say, because they're sitting on my desk in front of me, what if we started out with some US e-commerce chat?
So are you suggesting that we can pour whiskey right now?
I am.
Oh, gosh. Okay, well, I'm in. I mean, I was expecting to open this later, but the fact that we have our Glenmurray 13-year-old matured 8 years in a bourbon cask and 5 years in a first fill Oloroso sherry cask. This is going to be released this month in October 2024. I'm excited to pour this because it's been a while since we've bottled a Glenmurray, and we've had a long-standing relationship with them. So I think it's a good one to lead with.
Yeah, very much so. This when you've got very special relationships, there's a tendency to always say, well, this relationship means everything. And I worry that in saying it, you start to downplay some of your other relationships. And that is definitely not the goal here. And so I think when we came out the gate with our launch of Single Cask Nation in 2011 and moving casks in 2012, there was Aaron. That was a direct relationship. There was Kilhoman. That was a direct relationship. There was Ben Riach. That was a direct relationship. Mm-hmm. Those were the first 3 bottlings that came out the door. In the next offering, there was a Lafroig, purchased via broker. Mm-hmm. There was a Dalmore, purchased via broker. And there was a Glenmurray. And that Glenmurray in the second release was our very first relationship Glenmurray with Ian Allen and Graham Cool, when Graham was still distillery manager there. Mm-hmm. And so as fondly as we think of the early days with Aaron and Kilhoman and Ben Riach, I think as fondly about Glenmurray in those early days as well. And what going to the distillery and tasting cask samples and walking through the distillery with Ian and learning from him and Graham. It was a very, very cool start. A very Graham cool start to what we ended up establishing with Glenmurray and the Nation.
Yeah. Internally, we've kind of, even though they are not our first distillery relationship, internally we've been sort of referring to them as sort of our number one distillery, the distillery that we've had a relationship with for A, a long period of time, but B, the distillery we've bottled the most number of casks from. And am I correct in thinking that we've bottled more Glenmurray than other distilleries?
As Single Cask named Single Casks, Glenmurray, we've certainly done 3, maybe 4. I would say something like a Wild Turkey or a Westland. Probably far outstrips a Glenmurray.
That's a good point.
I'm thinking of Arran. We've gone through a couple of named single casks with them. Do look out in the future. Today's episode is not to discuss about the future, it's to discuss the present. But always more casks coming from established relationships. Yeah. And Glenmurray is one of those very special relationships. So think about it. We've done 2 ex-bourbon casks from them. Mm-hmm. We've done the bourbon Madeira split maturation from them. We've done the Fino that was purchased from a broker but went in front of Glenmurray for its blessing, for you and I. Correct. Saying, can we use the name and talk about it? And they said, yep, we trust you. Yep. Go ahead. So that brings us to 4. So that would put this at number 5 from Glenmurray.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, no, you bring up a very good point then. We bottled so much more Wild Turkey, so much more Westland. So I'll tell you, regardless, it's so nice to be returning to Glenmurray. So I definitely want to go over some of the notes that I'm getting on the nose and on the palate here. But I don't want to ignore the other 2 bottlings that we're going to be releasing for our SCN online or our e-commerce platform. But I'm just absolutely taken by the nose. And here's the first thing that I've got to say about this Glenmurray. If you were to put this in front of me blindly, I think I would have said this smells like a funky Wild Turkey. Seriously. Right. It's got that warehouse funk going on to it, which is awesome.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And that's, as much as we were just sitting here talking about Wild Turkey, and it's easy to be led by the power of suggestion, sitting just nosing it, I was thinking about the umami quality, the warehouse funk. There's a little bit of dankness to the nose. Mm-hmm. The other part I would say here is, just as we mentioned it a second ago, when we did that dual maturation Glenmurray with the Madeira that was, kind of co-picked with a cadre of nation members in Scotland at the distillery. This is sitting at 8 and 5. 8 in the ex-bourbon, 5 in the first fill Oloroso. Given that ex-Madeira one was 6 and 6.
Yeah.
I think you said this in the intro, right? We're working towards meeting in the middle here, right? An 8 and a 5. We're trying to get them close again. Yeah, I like that aspect a lot. And again, we get back to something we've discussed on the podcast, and Nation members have asked us along the way, what's the difference between a finish and a double maturation?
Thank you. Yep.
Right. And there's really nothing written down about it. There is a minimum amount of time for a finish. But if you could sit here with 8 years and 5 years, this is a double maturation.
Yeah, I don't disagree with it. In fact, I wholeheartedly agree with it. But the other point regarding finishing in general, or moving liquid from one cask to another, there are some out there that are skeptical. Some people downright poo-poo the idea. The fact of the matter is, regardless of the reason for putting liquid from one cask to another, when it comes to us, whatever the final outcome is, so long as it ticks all of the boxes for us, is the nose intriguing? Is it delicious? Does the texture just rock our world? Does it have a wonderfully long finish? If the end result is a delicious whiskey, I don't give a fuck how it got there. I mean, the details are interesting, and we want to share every one of those details as best and as much as we can. But in the end, a good whiskey is a good whiskey, and that's what we've been trying to, educate our nation members and anybody else who will listen to us, since 2011, that good whiskey is good whiskey is good whiskey.
Yeah, to my mind, the details are important after the fact.
Yeah.
When you and I and Jess are selecting casks, we're not being led by the description of them or the wood that's in use. We're instead saying, okay, if that's the wood that it's in, let's have a taste of that. Let's see what that is doing. If you then like it, then you bottle it. Then you can widely share the details of it. Mm-hmm. But the marker is whether it's a good whiskey or not. That's beginning, middle, and end of everything we've been doing for 13 years.
Yeah. Yep. And listen, when it comes to Glenmorangie, while we might not have bottled more from them than any other distillery, I think it's fair to say when people think about Single Cask Nation, they quite often talk about the quality of our Glenmorangie selections. And this one is, oh my gosh, it is, again, right out the gate, you get that sort of warehouse funk coming through, but there's one note that we have in our official tasting notes that I love, and it's raspberry compote smeared over warm pancakes. Like that is it. It's so fruity yet warming. I think of the buttery quality coming through on those pancakes.
That definitely paints a picture. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually sitting on the nose there and thinking cherry wax lips. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's got that kind of red fruit component.
Or even like one of those, not a chocolate-covered cherry, like, you know, just chocolate over cherry, but like a cherry cordial, right?
Yeah,
you have that syrup going on in there.
Absolutely. Man, we used to eat those as kids and imagine we were getting drunk on them. Apparently, it was just the sugar hitting us real hard.
There you go, little sugar high.
Hey, we'll come back to a few more notes in a second, but just to add on to what you were saying about the October release here, today's episode is dropping on October 16, and the launch of the October cask is happening October 17.
Correct.
So we have this Glenmorangie sitting in sherry, just so delicious. Happy to be sitting drinking on this. One that I think is a little out of the norm. You talk about a distillery from whom we've released a few casks. I think Kalila fits in that. A lot of them were named. A lot of them were undisclosed. But yeah, we've loved Kalila for a long time, and we have a 15-year-old sherry cask Kalila coming down the road that is well worth people's time. And then, in our usual tradition, just as we're busy talking about returning to Glenmorangie, returning to Kalila, we're going to put out a distillery we've never released before.
Of it.
Our very first cask of Tullabarden.
Right? This is so... I'm so glad. I'm so glad we are doing this, right? Tullabarden, for those people who don't know, they've had their sort of own bottlings here and there coming in and out of the market for whatever reason, never really hit with a number of the quote-unquote whiskey geeks, but has always been such a wonderful and solid component to a number of blended whiskeys out there. And Jason, you and I talk about this all the time, right? Like when we talk about, say, Glentockers or Macduff or Linkwood, you know, the reason why these distilleries exist is they make solid distillate that act as wonderful backbones to some really well-done blends. And I think,
yes.
Right? And I think Tullabarden fits within that wheelhouse, but so many people are either, you know, unfamiliar with Tullabarden, or maybe they've had some older ones in the past, and especially whiskey geeks I'm talking here, and it hasn't really hit with them. And so as whiskey geeks ourselves, when the sample came across our desk, we went into it being skeptical. And then we poured it. And we said, wait a second, there's a little bit of magic going on here, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and in the interest of our usual kind of peek behind the curtain, you and I selected the Tullibardine last November in Glasgow. Mm-hmm. And here we are, October, launching it in the US. There's that usual turnaround. We've talked about it in the podcast, talked about it in tastings. There's cask selection, then there's cask processing, bottle production, then there's importation and international shipping. It can go from November to October real fast.
Really, really fast. Yeah.
Real fast. And so that Tullibardine is being released as a 9-year-old in ex-bourbon. Mm-hmm. I misspoke a moment ago. The Kalila is a 2009 distillate bottled as a 14-year-old from that sherry cask.
Yeah.
And real tasty treat. That's going to be a really interesting Kalila for us to put out. That'll be the oldest Kalila we've put out.
Can I put a finer point on that particular one, and specifically on the cask itself? It's a sherry cask, but it is first fill Spanish oak Oloroso sherry cask. So there's going to be a good whack of sherry going on there. But again, right, something that you and I talk about all the time, ad infinitum, as some may say, ad nauseum, others may say, is that we never want that cask to overtake the distillery character, right? That house style. So that sherry is simply going to complement all of the beautiful aspects of Kalila that you love.
Yeah, and just to tie a bow on this October US e-commerce chat, the label for the Glenmurray that we're sitting here sipping says, "An absolute cracker from a distillery that remains very dear to us. The fruity Glenmurray spirit shines through the Spanish oak finish to produce an exquisitely balanced dram." Speaks to everything we've talked about in this little segment.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt.
So to round out the US e-commerce segment, Glenmurray in sherry for $140, Kalila in sherry for $145, and Tullibardine in bourbon for $85. All available at singlecasknation.com.
And just to put a fine point on it, because I don't think we mentioned it previously, these 3 online bottlings will go on sale Tuesday, October 22nd at 12 noon Eastern or 9 a.m. Pacific.
Yep.
I love that we have a bottling there for under $100.
A cheeky wee 9-year-old Tully for $85? Don't mind if we do.
Lovely. Yeah, it was great sort of revisiting those 3 bottlings and, of course, sipping on this Glenmurray, which I'm going to continue to enjoy until it's time to pour a select bottling from U.S. retail. Should we move on to our U.S. retail bottlings then?
Yeah, let's do it. What can Nation fans look for in retail stores?
So this most recent retail release is actually one of our larger retail bottlings, or releases, I should say, where normally we would do 5 or 6 casks. This time around, it's 8 different casks, all of them being single malt. And well, why don't I run down the list, and then Jason, you could choose which cask we want to taste. Okay.
Well, thank you.
So the ones that I'm about to mention, these bottlings are actually here now, here in the States, and they've started hitting some store shelves. I know K&L in California, so everything we import comes into California, so that state tends to get bottles sooner than everybody else. So K&L, I know, took on a lot. So if any of these sound interesting to you, feel free to check them out. If you live in a different state and they don't ship to you, please support your local shops, okay? They support us. Yeah. You should support them. It's the right thing to be doing. So yeah. Larger states like Texas will see it soon. I'm just thinking about that wagon journey east that is not historically accurate. Stores in Illinois will see it, and then Massachusetts, New York State, places like that. So big states, you expect to see it. Yeah, there you go. So I'm going to open up with what might be one of the more exciting ones, though maybe not. We have an 11-year-old Bowmore distilled in 2013 from a second fill bourbon hogshead. Right, this is the very first Bowmore we did was a 30-year-old. This one is an 11-year-old. Very fruity in style. We have a 9-year-old Royal Broccola, also from a second fill bourbon hogshead. And those are both full maturation in those casks. And then we've got...
Yeah, first time with a Royal Broccola for these shores.
Right, yeah, good point. Then we have a bottling which we're calling Black's Boat Bridge.
Love that title.
So it's from a very famous Speyside distillery that I think they may refer to themselves as a Highland distillery, though they are clearly within the bounds of or boundaries of Speyside.
Yeah, and we had this conversation about the global Black's Boat Bridge with Jess last episode as well.
Indeed. Thank you. Good reminder.
Talked a little bit about a Google Maps or an Apple Maps bit of fun to be had with Black's Boat Bridge.
So this one is a 13-year-old, and it was 8 years in bourbon, 5 years in a first fill Oloroso sherry hogshead.
A similar story to we just had with our Glenmorangie there.
Right. This next one, it's not only new to our shores here in the U.S., but it's a new distillery for us, period, full stop. And this is our 12-year-old Glen Scotia. Super exciting to have bottled our first Campbelltown malt from one of our absolute favorite distilleries, Glen Scotia. And this whiskey was 10 years in bourbon, but then 2 years in new charred oak. And it's lightly peated, so there's going to be a lot of flavors going out with that one. Following that one, we have a 16-year-old Craigellachie, distilled in 2007. And that one was 11 years in bourbon and then 5 years in first fill Spanish oak Oloroso. You almost there? Am I getting you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I'm listening intently. I'm enjoying this list. I love the fact it keeps going. And if that's not enough, listen to this.
Yeah, we've got 3 more. We have an 18-year-old Strathclyde. So actually, I said before, all of these are going to be single malt.
Yes.
And I stand corrected. So Strathclyde is a single grain. I wondered about that comment. Yeah, thank you. Strathclyde is a single grain distillery, but known for having a very hefty spirit. And I think their spirit is as weighty as a malt, yet it is single grain Scotch whiskey rather than single malt. And that one was, it's 18 years old, and it spent just a bit over 2 years in an American oak STR Barrique.
I remember that selection very well.
Yeah. And Strathclyde is Glasgow, right? Just outside of Glasgow?
Yeah. Yep.
There you go. That's your hometown there.
Close by.
All right. Balmenach is our next one. This is an 11-year-old that spent a similar amount of time in a secondary cask in a first fill barrel, but it was heavy toast, medium char, and American oak. So instead of an STR Barrique, where they take a wine cask and they shave, toast, and re-char the inside of that, this is basically new charred oak. So 27 months in new charred oak for that Balmenach. And Balmenach is a worm tub distillery, so expect a good weighty spirit to that. And then finally, and I cracked this one open the other day because I needed comfort. And so I grabbed our 12-year-old Linkwood from a first fill bourbon barrel, and it was just so buttery, so warming, so rich. You know exactly what you're getting when it comes to Linkwood and bourbon, and that's what I wanted. I needed a hug, and I got a nice Linkwood hug. Yep.
Oh, I love hearing that from Linkwood. I think it's easy to overlook Linkwood because it is consistently good, and it doesn't have the sexy name. You know, one of the responsibilities we've taken on as an independent bottler over 13 years is to represent the underdog, right? You just mentioned Balmenic a second ago. I've been on a Balmenic kick in 2024. There's Mannockmore, right, which we'll get to another day. We're on a Mannockmore kick as well.
Yeah.
A Thrusk. Right? There's so much of Scotland still to discover. And we take our responsibility very seriously that it's our job to curate those casks for the nation.
Yeah.
That's who we want to put in front of the nation. So when you go seeking solace in a Linkwood, that is very cool. You know, when we talk about bottling our first Glen Scotia, obviously Campbelltown is having a wonderful moment, a well-deserved moment. But Glen Scotia is sometimes the underdog to Springbank.
Yeah, right.
And we love Glen Scotia. Absolutely love Glen Scotia. Operated by tremendous people, right? We had Ian McAllister on the podcast.
Yeah, twice.
And
twice now, yeah.
He's a mensch of the highest order. Absolutely love that guy to bits. So just like we're saying, Glen Murray, Ian Allen is still with Glen Murray. Hopefully we'll see him in November in Scotland. Like, there are such good people working at some of these distilleries. It's worth getting to know them. It's worth getting to know the distilleries. Discovery. That's what this is all about.
So I would like to make a suggestion then. Seeing as we poured Glen Murray as a representation of our online bottlings, and our friend Ian Allen there is our connective tissue between Single Cask Nation and Glen Murray, seeing as we have some connective tissue to Ian McAllister to Glen Scotia, why don't we pour a little bit of Glen Scotia?
So the good news is when you opened the floor for me to make a selection and I started planning that while you were talking, Glen Scotia is what I said.
Ah, there we go.
For the exact same reason,
yeah.
Right? It's Ian McAllister dram. This was distilled 2012. Ian McAllister was at the distillery at that time.
Oh, man. Yeah, I think he came on in 2009 or so, if I'm not mistaken. So this is clearly distillate that would have been made under his watch. And, you know, you and I have had a few conversations with him about this. And listeners who, you know, who are regular listeners of our podcast may remember it became clear that Glen Scotia really started coming into its own, at least in more modern terms, under the watch of Ian McAllister, right?
Yeah, I think Loch Lomond Group were a very good part of that. I think the investment in the distillery was very smart. I think reworking the wood was very smart. You know, clearly when we've spoken to Ian on One Nation Under Whisky, he has waxed lyrical about the bourbon casks that he has explored, and finding bottles of bourbon that he can then, you know, return to in cask form for the maturation of Glen Scotia. And I know that's very near and dear to him. I just turned this label around a little bit to take a peek at the flavometer. The truncated notes are wood smoke, oatcakes, pepper. But what's really got me is how smoky we have it on the flavometer, which I think is a 6, unless my eye. It's an 8.
It's an 8. Yeah, it's an 8, and we know this. We know that the distillate that went into this cask is part of Glen Scotia's lightly peated distillate. So they've got 4 different distillates, if memory serves: unpeated, lightly peated, medium peat, and heavy peat. And the fact that this is lightly peated, which were the specifications on the paperwork, yet the peat is really coming through in our experience, I kind of wonder, is that peat being reinforced by the new charred oak?
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Exactly that, right? The 60s are balanced out with rich, spicy, earthy, and oaky.
Yeah.
And so those are in balance at 6, and then they're pushing that smoke out another 2 points there.
Yeah.
That is a little drinker. # please enjoy the whole bottle responsibly. But gosh, I don't want to describe my drinking habits to the good listeners, but you could pour a wee dram of that while making dinner, after making dinner, sitting on the couch watching a wee program or reading a wee book, and then having another wee one before bedtime. I love that wood smoke to it as well.
I wanted to read an excerpt from our own tasting notes, and initially I was gonna say, let's read the nose, because the nose is just intriguing. I haven't even sipped this yet. But then I went on to look at what we had written down for the palate, and I really need to talk about these notes coming through on the palate. So I'm going to read it verbatim from what we wrote down here. So on the palate, luxurious honeyed texture with flavors of smoked malt, kippers, aka smoked herring, charred wood, ground ginger, turmeric, and nutmeg.
Yep. Absolutely.
Oh, man.
Absolutely. That wood is shining through there. Mm-hmm. And yet the spirit fights its corner, right? It still represents Glenmorangie, while that wood is adding layer upon layer to the experience.
Well, is that smoked malt coming through?
Yeah. Yeah.
It really shines. And when I first noticed it, I said, oh, it's kind of, and you use this word all the time, redolent. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah,
redolent. Redolent. It almost reminded me a bit of some of the aspects you'd get from a Bruichladdich initially.
Interesting.
Because it seems a bit older. It seems a bit dusty, warehousey coming through. But I think that's that smoke. Yeah, go ahead. To
me, it was the malt barn quality of it that came through. So when you talk about dusty, yes, sometimes that air can have a bit of the barley dust in the air, or the kiln can have a little bit of the peat smoke escaping. It's definitely that. It absolutely, as you point out here, is redolent of being at a distillery, right? And walking floor to floor, and what you're experiencing at different floors. Needed about it.
Oh, man. Yeah, I love both the Glenmorangie that we've tasted and this Glen Scotia for two very different reasons, right? This is why, I love you and I say I because I'm the American who's meant to love bourbon more than anything, but I love malt whiskey more than anything because the flavors run the gamut. We're at two very opposite ends of a wide flavor spectrum here, and I'm falling in love all over again.
Right, and the fact that if you could only pick one to sample, it's the Glen Scotia here. The Bowmore is special. The Blackspoke Bridge is special. Jess was tasting the global Blackspoke Bridge in the last episode. Blackspoke Bridge is a home run wherever you find it. Then you talk about the heaviness of a Strathclyde grain spirit.
Right.
It's and the excitement of a Linkwood and a Balmenic and a Royal Brackla. Really happy with this outturn. There are no weak spots. There are no low spots. You could do an 8-bottle tasting anywhere in the US, and all 8 represent themselves incredibly well.
And I think this talks to something that we'd been saying over and over again since January 4 of this year, where people said, okay, you've been acquired by ASC. How is that going to change Single Cask Nation? And the answer is, it hasn't. The selections are still ours. We still stand behind each and every one. And if we have to say no to a cask, despite the distillery sexy name,
and we have
because it doesn't work, then that's what we do. We, as an independent bottler, all we have is a reputation. And if we release anything that we think is below our standards, then we're not doing our job right. If you don't like it in the end, well, that's on you. That's not on us, right? We stand by.
Different people have different palates.
Right? So, yeah, I just, like you had said, I don't think there's not one here that isn't a home run.
Yep. If ASC has changed anything, it's made us stronger. It's increased what the pool we're selecting from.
Right.
It's given us an abundance of sherry casks to select from, and other types of cask as well. It's exciting every day. And, again, little peek behind the curtain. We've spent the last few months starting to plan out 2025. And what stories are we going to tell in 25? Where are the areas of interest in 2025? And the samples that we're able to pull from the ASC warehouse, as well as pulling from some of our own pre-acquisition casks, is allowing us to tell a very full whiskey story. And if you're a fan of the nation, you're a fan of even better casks, even more interesting casks. Distilleries showing up in SCN livery for the very first time.
Yeah.
That is super cool.
And to add on to that, we still have free reign to establish new distillery relationships.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, it's I feel like we're Pac-Man and the ASC acquisition was just a power pellet, right?
This is something that I do want to put in front of listeners, and this is a global wide question.
Okay.
Is who are you looking for? What distilleries are you looking for? We're talking about having this increased access to stocks. Well, what would listeners like to see in a Single Cask Nation bottle? Send that in, right? info@singlecasknation.com. Is questions at onenationunderwhisky.com ever going to live again?
I don't know if it's going to live again. We're still having issues, so let's stick with info@singlecasknation.com.
Yeah, drop us a note. It's always fascinating to hear what other people, other whiskey geeks are looking for. And we're in a very privileged position of having access to cask lists. We're a distillery that might not gain our eyeballs, might be of interest to a listener, a nation member, a nation fan, a fan of the nation.
Yeah.
Right? Let us know. info@singlecasknation.com. Love to hear from you. Cheers.
There you go. Beauty. Before we go on to our other bottlings, and we're going to stay within the realm of the U.S. for our next little segment here, in our exclusives. But before we get to that, I just wanted to mention what the suggested retail prices are for these bottlings, which I have to mention, your mileage may vary. Some shops make a little less, some make a little more. States have different taxes, your mileage,
overheads change.
Right, it's your mileage simply may vary. So going down the list, the Bowmore that I mentioned has a suggested retail price of $140 a bottle. The Royal Broccola 9-year-old, $110 per bottle. Again, these are just suggested retail prices. Things may change. Our Blacksboat Bridge 13-year-old, $140 a bottle. Our Glen Scotia 12-year-old that I am sucking down because it's goddamn delicious, $130 a bottle. Our 16-year-old Craigellachie, $170 a bottle. $170 for a sherry cask matured 16-year-old Craigellachie, right? Great price.
Good price.
Our 18-year-old Strathclyde from the STR Barrique, $145 a bottle. Our Balmenic, right? One of these new distilleries that you are chasing, Jason.
Absolutely.
$125 a bottle. And then finally, our Linkwood 12-year-old, my comfort dram from last night, $125 a bottle.
Nice. Really nice.
Yep.
Fair pricing all the way around.
All the way around. We bottle drinkers. That's our remit.
Awesome. So as much as that's a ton of exciting news around US retail, we have also been talking about some exclusives, and we're not going to belabor the point, but what could some people in some states have a look out for?
Well, there's a lot here, right? And again, it gets back to what we were saying before. being a part of ASC has allowed us access to so many more casks, so many more distilleries, and it has afforded us the opportunity to reignite this cask pick program, which we had a few years ago, and then we had to mothball for a number of reasons. But it's back again. And so, if you're in Texas, there's going to be 4 different single casks coming through specs. From Isla distilleries like Kalila to maybe a cheeky wee space cider that I don't want to mention the name of, to what I've been calling my most eye-opening cask of the year. It's the one that if I could have purchased all of the bottles and kept them at my house, I will have, and it's an Altabane, and that is from a second fill of Richard Weinberg. Just lovely stuff.
Yeah, those are words that don't always move the dial, which is kind of partly what we've been talking about in today's episode. But let the whiskey talk to you, right? Maybe you don't know too much about Altavania, right? Maybe you don't like red wine casks. Trust Single Cask Nation. Trust Jason and Joshua. Trust whoever selected that as an exclusive at Specs. Mm-hmm. It's special liquid in that bottle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt about it. Let me jump really quickly to Illinois, and we've got some cask exclusives going on there. So our dear friend Gene at Warehouse selected a Black's Boat Bridge, but from bourbon cask, first fill bourbon.
Classic Gene, right?
Right. Yeah, he's gonna zig when others zag, which I love. I always love that about him. And then our dear friend Brett at Binny's had selected an Auchentoshan and a Glenbergie.
Wild. Right. Did Michael Nolan tell him, if you bring in a Glenbergie, I'll buy all the bottles? Like, is that what happened here?
I actually told, when I was having the conversation with Brett, and I was thinking of what we should be offering. I said, well, we have to offer the Glenbergie because Michael Nolan lives in Chicago. And I did. I said, I know you've got at least one customer that is going to flip his lid if you bring this in. And he responded. He said, Auchentoshan and Glenbergie are 2 of my most favorite distilleries. Please send me the samples. So it was good. Yeah.
But again, that speaks to the very point we're making today, right? There's Brett, who's around whiskey every hour of every day, right? Being bombarded with offerings. And which 2 distilleries does he just have there? Glenbergie and Auchentoshan. How many Nation members are walking in the door saying, send us the Glenbergie, send us the Auchentoshan, right? Good whiskey is good whiskey.
Yeah.
And we need to be more committed to good whiskey and less committed to the super sexy names that helps bottles walk out of a door.
What? Yeah.
And listen, I'm as guilty as anybody, right? Give me a cheeky wee Highland Park, give me a wee Ardbeg or a wee Bowmore, I'm as guilty as anybody. But there are other distilleries out there well worth tracking down. And that's true in Scotland, it's true outside of Scotland.
Yeah.
Right? The way we talk about Westland, Westward, VDC, etc., etc.
Yep.
So we need to remain open-minded. This is important. Yep. Thank you. I will step back off my soapbox.
I'm going to highlight Massachusetts and Connecticut just now. So our dear friend, a really dear friend, Jacob from Wise Old Dog, selected a Black's Boat Bridge sherry cask matured that was distilled on his grandma's birthday.
Hey-o.
I mean, it's not as old as his grandma is. Let's just be clear.
1920. No, that's no disparaging comments here.
Right? So that's going to be coming to Connecticut. I mean, these bottlings that we're talking about right now are here in the States. Yeah. They're just making their way over to these shops. Yep. So hopefully you've got your pen and pad, right? And then we've got in Massachusetts, we have a bottling of Fettercairn, an 11-year-old that is going to be... We basically bottled this for the independent shops of Massachusetts, right? So your Julios and your Norfolks and your Four Seasons, right? Burlington Wine and Spirits, right? And a few others as well. Incomplete Joshua Hatton list, to be sure.
Thank you.
But speaking of Burlington Wine and Spirits, they split a cask of peated Arran from their La Carranza distillery with our dear friend Irene Tan, who's Canterbury Liquors here in Connecticut. So if you're in Connecticut, grab a bottle from Irene. If you're in Massachusetts, grab a bottle from our friends at Burlington Wine and Spirits.
That's awesome. And Irene, who was just on the podcast a few episodes ago.
Yeah, yep, exactamo.
Really nice.
There's 1, 2, or maybe 3 more, but there's one I know for certain that is going to be coming out. And so, back to us having guests on the podcast, we recently had Svi Vizel from Baxis on, and we did a special Black's Boat Bridge for Svi as well, and another bourbon barrel there for him. Svi's another guy who really likes to open people's eyes to different aspects of distilleries and turn people on to new things, get them out of their comfort zone. So he went for a Black's Boat Bridge there. And so if you don't know Baxis, check them out, baxis.co. And if you do know Baxis, well, you're in luck. There's going to be a Black's Boat Bridge coming soon.
And just as we'd said earlier, Black's Boat Bridge is not an established distillery. It is a fanciful name on Single Cask Nation labels. The distillery themselves consider themselves a highland, but you'll find them on a map south of Aberlour and east of Cragganmore.
And here, this is the last thing I'll say, and this one is really for the shop owners, for distributors, for... I hesitate to say clubs, but if you're a big whiskey club, and if you're any of these and you're interested in your own cask exclusive, be it Scotch whiskey, we've got American whiskeys and other bits and bobs up our sleeves, this program is open. We're interested to working with like-minded whiskey lovers. So again, info at singlecasknation.com, and we're happy to start that conversation.
Yeah, and then the other part that you were beginning to suggest a few moments ago, Impex, our exclusive US importer, are also working on selling exclusive casks in the SCN livery. Indeed. So today will be an incomplete Joshua Hatton list of US exclusives since sales are still happening. But Indeed. As we find out information, we pass it along. The idea behind today's episode is to give as much information as we possibly can to keep you, the listener, up to speed with where you can find Single Cask Nation offerings.
Yeah, beauty.
With US e-com, US retail, and US retail exclusives in the rearview mirror, this has been a terrific episode, and sitting dramming along certainly does not help. To reiterate, we had Jess on the last episode talking about the 8 casks that will be seen in our global markets. Different things are floating around the world, but countries to keep in mind are Germany and Canada, Japan and Israel and Australia, the UK, of course. There's another couple on the horizon, but we're not ready to talk about them just yet. But do keep your eyes open. The UK has some terrific selections available right now. You can buy online, stick them in your cart, ship them wherever you may reside. Yeah. So without belaboring the point, Joshua, what can you remind us of the 8 that Jess was talking about in the last episode?
Man, all I want to do is belabor shit. Can't I belabor anything?
Remembering how much we enjoyed that Tobermory.
Oh my gosh, that Tobermory is like pure magic, just like lightning in a bottle. Oh, okay.
And Jess, of course, is saying the Tobermory's lovely, absolutely lovely, but why don't you feel this way about the Black's Boat Bridge? It's like, no, that's wonderful too. The Black's Boat Bridge, you expect it,
yes,
given the distillery it comes from. Tobermory, which I like, I much prefer Licheg offerings from the Tobermory distillery, but to get a super interesting Tobermory at a decent age as well. So, sorry.
Yeah,
please,
no, don't be sorry. Keep talking Tobermory. I'm almost there. So I'll go through the list here. And you know what? I'm going to do it alphabetically.
Checks out.
So we're going to start off with our Aberfeldy, which is a 10-year-old. And one of the things I love about this Aberfeldy is it started off its life in refill bourbon and then was transferred into second fill bourbon.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Right? And what I like about that, again, it highlights the distillery character, right? It brings the oak that you want without hiding the distillery character. Just magic in a bottle. Balmenic, another distillery in your wheelhouse, but I loved this as well. 11-year-old from a first fill bourbon barrel, and it's full maturation.
There you go. As soon as you hear that first fill bourbon maturation, yeah, it's a cracking Balmenic. You know, we obviously thought that at selection, and Jess will go out, sell that on to folk. Delicious.
Yep. And I feel this name has come up more than other names throughout this podcast.
I know which bee it is.
This is the Black's Boat Bridge, and it is a 13-year-old that was 8 years bourbon, 5 years in a first fill Oloroso Spanish oak, if I'm not mistaken, hogshead. And only 155 bottles out of that cask, so there's some leaking going on there. So I know here in the U.S.
A lot of the Black's Boat Bridge came out with pretty
low outturns, right?
Bottle numbers, yeah.
You know, anytime I see a lower number, and I don't know if this is the correct way of thinking. In fact, I'm quite sure it isn't the correct way of thinking, but here we are. Bourbon lovers, myself included, when there is a barrel that is short, right, that should have 180 bottles, but for some reason gave you 110 bottles, you say, oof, that's going to be nice. Were the angels greedy? Was there a leak? Whatever it is, there's going to be something special about that. And when I saw, 155 bottles out of a hogshead, which could hold 330, 340 bottles, like, yeah, that's a special one. Moving on, we're going to visit Islay now, and this is our first UK release from Bunnahabhain of their Stoisha distillate, which is a heavily peated, and this was started its life off in bourbon and spent its last 3.5 years in a refill PX Pedro Jimenez sherry hogshead.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Interesting. For nation members in the US who have listened this far, I will drop a little Easter egg right here for you that in November, our e-commerce in the US will have an ex-bourbon Stoisha, but bourbon in, bourbon out. So.
Yeah, right. Yeah. All right, we're going to leave the B's and we're going to go to the C's. You've always been a good C, Jason. I've always said that about you.
The BBC, man. The BBC.
So this is a birthday bottling for Jess. This is our 35-year-old Cambus, distilled in 1989. Yep. Cambus is a shuttered grain distillery. Spent 32 years of its life in bourbon, and the last 3 years of its life in a first fill STR barrique. So you're going to get that big sort of wood presence, maybe a little bit of wine sweetness coming through, but the fruit, not the wine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a cracking canvas, cracking grain whiskey and cracking older whiskey. Yeah,
right.
Really happy. Remember the selection of that. Remember talking to Jess about a birthday, 12th of June, 89 for that. It's a tasty, tasty grain whiskey. That's going to go over very well.
Yeah, no doubt. And then we are here with our Glengarry now, 21 years in first fill bourbon. Distilled I almost said 2010-13, but that's not a thing. Distilled in 2003, bottled in 2024 as a 21-year-old.
Beautiful. Glengarry, man. Jess had a 9-year-old Glengarry in fresh bourbon for her global markets. Blew people away.
Right. To
follow that up with this older 21-year-old, that's going to go over fantastically well. Another little Easter egg, I would say, to US-based nation members. Don't blink on the 2003 Glengarry and ex-bourbon. Your friends on this side of the pond see you. Going to leave it at that.
So there's two more on my list, but I know there's one that you want to bring in at the end. So let me read these, and then I'll let you go. Now we're in the G's.
Oh, gosh.
No, it's not gosh.
Where were in the G's with the Glengarrys?
Oh, shit. We remain in the G's. We remain in the Glens. How's that? This is a 10-year-old Glenmurray. And remember, earlier in the episode, we were talking about the 13-year-old that came to the U.S. that was 8 years bourbon, 5 years sherry.
I do remember that.
This one is a 10-year-old that was 4 years bourbon, 6 years second fill, PX, Pedro Jimenez, hogshead.
That is Single Cask Nation right there, my friend. Gosh, we talked 6 and 6 bourbon and Madeira. We talked 8 and 5 bourbon and sherry. And now give me that one again. 4 and 8?
4 and 6.
4 and 6. 4 and 6. Rocking, man. Rocking.
Right? Yeah.
It's so cool.
And another one that just, you know our love of Glenmurray. You and I, of course, know it. Our listeners hopefully know it. You got to get these bottles and open them up and see what we're talking about. Glenmurray is so often and unfortunately an overlooked distillery, but their spirit absolutely shines. They're starting to bottle more at 46.2, 46.3% alcohol. Their own bottlings to really lift up the spirit. They're so worth checking out. Discover them through us first. Continue discovering them through us, but check them out too. We really hope that if you don't know them or not familiar with them, that a bottle from us is your foot in that Glenmurray door.
Oh yeah, we're going to continue to champion Glenmurray. We believe in them wholeheartedly. Glenmurray single cask at cask strength, brilliant.
Right. And then finally, Jason, are you ready? Have you girded your loins?
They are girded. I couldn't gird them any more than they're currently girded.
We have reached the end of my list, which is our 16-year-old Tobermory. That was 13 years in bourbon, but then 3 years in a refill French oak barrique. And listen, I just really quickly, can I read these tasting notes for the Tobermory?
Go crazy.
No, first off, color. Yellow topaz, and I think we mentioned the color in our episode with Jess, right?
Oh, Jess, couldn't have been happier.
Nose, breakfast in a glass, warm porridge with sliced bananas and cream, ripe honeydew and cantaloupe melons, dried apricots, fruit pastilles. Is that how you pronounce that? Pastilles? That note is yours, I know for sure. Anyway, fruit pastilles. Pastils? Pastilles with a grounding earthiness, toasted sandalwood and burning leaves. Palate, redolent of the coast. Redolent of the coast with wet sand dunes, marram grass. And I remember us mentioning that in our episode with Jess. And a hint of salt in the air, but note too the fresh soaked barley, dry hay, yellow rhubarb, and gentle vanilla sponge sweetness. Finally, the finish. Long and lingering saltiness, barley sugar, and a beguiling minerality.
There you go. As you read those notes out loud, I remember tasting exactly those notes in that Tobermory. Those are such a perfect representation of that single cask. Really,
100%.
really wonderful.
Yeah, and it's one of those casks that helped change my own mind. You know, like you, I tend to prefer Lechig over Tobermory. So Tobermory Distillery's peated spirit over their unpeated spirit. But having tasted this single cask tells me there's so much more to explore, that we can't just rest on our laurels. If we're an independent bottler that's meant to seek out flavor and share flavor, we've got to continue seeking out distillate styles that haven't clicked with us previously.
Absolutely. And then we need to trust that the nation will trust us when we put something in front of them that isn't an automatic home run, right? I still get asked about bottling Jura, and I tell people, to this day, we continue to search for it. If you see a Jura in Single Cask Nation livery, you know it's going to be one of the best damn Juras you've ever tasted. And we keep searching.
So you've had this one in your back pocket. A cask exclusive for a UK retailer?
Exactly, yeah. In 2024, Jess managed to break ground with the Whiskey Shop in the UK. And so they have committed to a Macduff, distilled in 2008, bottled as a 16-year-old at 56.8% alcohol from a first fill American oak Oloroso hogshead. And that has been a, 3.5-year finish, 4-year finish? I think so, yeah. By the 4-year by the time it was bottled. So really, really exciting to have that partnership with that retailer. There are other exclusives Jess is working on behind the scenes that we are too early to talk about, but she is forever working diligently behind the scenes. And then Canada has a couple of exclusives within this global realm of exclusive casks.
They do. So the first one that I want to mention here is one that gets us back to what our dear friend James Saxon of Compass Box likes to refer to as the Single Cask Nation cinematic universe.
That's it.
And so that one is actually an 8-year-old Kalila. And this was bottled for Kensington Wine Market. People around the world have to know Kensington, right? And so it was an 8-year-old that started off its life in bourbon, but then was transferred into an ex-Apres rum, right? A Brazilian rum that we bottled for the global markets, not for the U.S., but for the global markets. So Kalila in refill bourbon, then into a second fill, or refill, I should say, rum barrel. And it's doing all the Kalila-y things you want it to do with some of that Brazilian rum funk and that sort of balsam and fir kind of Christmas wreath note coming through. It's just a wild, wild Kalila.
Yeah, one of the things with that cask is the rum never runs away with the show. The rum presents complementary flavor profiles with the Kalila always in mind. And I think it's sometimes easy with a rum cask finish to feel like you're almost drinking a rum-forward cocktail. Yeah. And this one remains Kalila with some rum Apres Brazilian highlights. And really proud of it. Really glad Andrew brought that in as an exclusive for himself. I think that's going to go really well for customers of Kensington in Calgary.
Yeah, for sure. And then the final one, again, this is for Canada, and this is for the Edmonton Scotch Club. And
awesome. Yeah.
And this one is a bit older. This is an 18-year-old Linkwood that spent, the first 14 years of its life in bourbon, but then was transferred into a first fill American oak Oloroso hogshead. So remember what I was saying about Linkwood and just it's so consistent and it's so comforting. It's like a whiskey hug. Well, now add in some of the fruitiness from that sherry, but I would argue this is also a very spicy whiskey. So that sherry oak added on some really spicy characteristics to it. It's just really phenomenal whiskey.
Well, and this on the back of us having a red wine maturation Linkwood for the United States retail line, and Jess having a French oak Linkwood for the global line.
Yeah.
Right? There's so many different ways to show Linkwood. So long as you let that Linkwood spirit lead the way, all the other complementary notes can be incredibly delicious.
Indeed. Yeah.
That was a hell of a news segment.
I tell you, the paper boy is smarting right now. He's like, you fuckers. This was my moment to shine, and we haven't heard from him at all.
I did think, honestly, about 5 minutes ago, I thought we should have had the paper boy at the beginning of today's episode. This has turned into a lot. Is there anywhere people can go and actually find information on all of these releases?
Is that a rhetorical question that I should know the answer to? So the quick and easy answer to your question is no, but it's not as simple as no, right? So one of the things that we're looking to do on our own website is to really highlight all of these things. You know, we have a newer website that is less than a year old. We're still building it out. So that will become sort of a central repository for this sort of stuff. But if you are interested in our U.S. retail line, not the Cask Pick program where we're doing exclusives, but the retail range that we mentioned just prior to that with the Glen Scotia and such, you can go to the Impex Bev website, impexbev.com, and they'll have details there. And of course, if you have any questions about that range, you know, whether you're a consumer looking for a shop near you or a shop looking to get some of this, reach out to office@impexbev.com and they will surely help you out.
That's really good. Really good. And I would say if you're international, reach out to info@singlecasknation.com. We'll get it to the right person to answer any question you've got.
Yep, for sure. And then of course our our online bottlings, right? Singlecasknation.com, the Glen Murray that we opened with, the Tullibardine that's coming out, right? The Kalila that's going to be accompanying those. Kalila. Those are going to go live on October 17th, so you'll get more details there as well when they do come out.
Yep, and the thing I would always say, just maybe last comment on that retail side of things, wherever you are in the world, always ask your local retailer, what Single Cask Nation can we get into this shop? You know, empower the consumer. Be an empowered consumer.
Yeah.
Like, can we get Single Cask Nation? I've heard so much about it. I listened to an amazing podcast that spent an hour and a half telling me the Single Cask Nation news. Can I get Single Cask Nation? So, as a consumer, empower yourself as well.
There you go. You can't get what you want if you don't ask for it.
There you go. Right. Bring a little bit of America around the world. Don't be passive. Don't be British.
You got to just get a little American in you. That could be taken away. So Jason,
could be taken the wrong way
or the right way. So thank you as always. Spending time with you, talking about, here we are, year 13 going on year 14, and this has been the biggest year for us when it comes to releasing whiskeys, and what a journey it's been. So I thank you for being the best business partner one can ask for in growing this dream of ours. And so I raise my glass to you. I raise my glass, and I know you join me in this, to our importers, our distributors, to our nation members, to our listeners that maybe if you're not a Nation member, you'll become a Nation member. We raise our glass to you. We do this because you're there for us, and we couldn't do it without you. So
yeah, well, and I would add to Jess and to Steve, the team in Glasgow, who have worked their tail off this year, putting almost 100 casks into bottle for us, and we came on the scene January 4. So to them as well, right? It takes an entire village, and we have an incredibly supportive structure within SCN, within ASC, and across the global nation. Cheers to you all, and cheers to you, Joshua.
Cheers.